都未開始。
唔計住。
秘書處話唔計住，因為佢都話點唔切啊！你話好啦，由於到
Right. We've got a quorum already, so may I now call the meeting to order. Information papers issued since the last meeting. There are two. Members can refer to the agenda. Items for discussion at the next meeting. The next meeting, Tommy Cheung, I can see you. Next meeting, 8th of June, Monday, 4:30. The administration has proposed two items for discussion, namely Chinese learning for ethnic minorities and non-Chinese speaking students. So the administration will brief us on the progress in relation to the initiative announced in the 2014 policy address, including the support for and also support for schools and also professional support and other aspects. And then second item, making public teacher registration materials. So the administration will brief us on the present teacher registration mechanism and the proposal to make available for public inspection the information registered. And after the meeting, I will discuss with the deputy chairman what items should be discussed at the meeting in June, including the possibility of discussing Mr. Tommy Cheung's suggestion as stated in this letter. And under ROP 83A, if members have any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in any matter being discussed today, they should, before speaking on those matters, declare their interest first. So, pilot scheme on promoting interflow between Hong Kong mainland sister schools. Many members have raised their hands. And as we have 4 agenda items today, let me first say that I need to extend the meeting by 15 minutes. And if the meeting is to be extended by more than 15 minutes, then of course I have to get the consent of members. Right, so item 3 on the agenda, pilot scheme on promoting interflow between the Hong Kong mainland sister schools. This is paper 925/01. So let's invite the officials in. Ms. Helena Wong. Now I want to ask questions on this item, Chairman. That was why I raised my hand. And concerning the list of outstanding items for discussion, there is an item on policy on funding support provided to post-secondary institutions by the UGC and the RGC. And the proposed timing for discussion has yet to be confirmed. I understand that tertiary institutions would like to state their views to the panel on this matter. So I will be looking at this matter when, after the meeting, I will be having a discussion with the Deputy Chairman because they're going to decide on the funding for the upcoming triennium in September. Chairman, concerning my letter, I hope that the Secretary can study my letter and give a reply as early as possible so that we can have a discussion at the next regular meeting. I'll not waste your time. I'll pause here. All right, so this letter will be forwarded to the Secretary, and we look forward to the Secretary's reply. All right, thank you, Secretary, for coming to the meeting. This is a paper 925/01. Secretary, please. Yes, Chairman. Thank you. Since the reunification, there have been more and more contacts between Hong Kong schools and mainland schools. There are visits and other interflow projects, and that was why in 2004 the a scheme on establishing or forming sister schools came into being. And the schools that have taken part in the scheme have given very positive response. Have you finished with your your introduction? Not yet, but I'll be brief. Only 2 paragraphs. Chairman, I'll continue. The Education Bureau provides support and coordination for the forming of sister schools between Hong Kong schools and mainland schools, but we have not been providing funding support. Interflow between sister schools in Hong Kong and the mainland can benefit both parties, but at the moment schools can only have non-regular or one-off exchange or interflow programs because of lack of funding. And so we're proposing to, in 3 school years, 2015-16, 2016-17, and 2017-18, provide a non-recurrent grant of $120,000 per annum to each public sector or DSS primary and secondary school, including special school, participating in the pilot scheme to enhance the breadth and depth of cooperation between sister schools with a view to further promoting professional development and enriching the learning experience of students. The Education Bureau will provide professional support to schools taking part in the pilot scheme, and so we expect the pilot scheme to cost about $200 million over a 3-year period. So this is so the funds allocated to the schools must be used for promoting interflow with the sister school and other related activities. So we hope that we can promote multifaceted development of interflow activities between sister schools in Hong Kong and the mainland. We also hope to enhance professional development, and we hope that Secretary, we hope that we'll ultimately have about 600 Hong Kong schools forming sister schools with schools in the mainland. Please be brief because we have many members who would like to speak. In fact, the details of the pilot scheme have been communicated to principals, governing bodies, and teachers of the schools concerned, and they've expressed interest and support. So we will go to FC for funding approval later. Thank you. Thank you, Secretary. Many members have raised their hands. I'll read out the list. Claudia Mo, Gary Fan. Not your turn yet. Claudia Mo, Gary Fan, Wong Kwok Heng, Tommy Cheung, Ip Kin Yun, Charles Mock, Leung Kwok Hong, Ma Fong Kwok, Helena Wong, Kenneth Chan, Ann Chang, Sid Ho, and also Lam Tai Fai, if there is sufficient time. Now, because you all raised your hands at the same time, but then the clerk has got only 2 eyes, but then she saw over 20 hands. Some of you raised both hands. So I think the clerk really should have electronic eyes before she can record all the members who have spoken. All right, Sid Ho, and also Yip Kwok Kim, Starry Lee, Leung Yu Chong, and if there is time, Lam Tai Fai. 3 minutes, including replies. I have to enforce the time limit very rigorously.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not a panel member, but I need to mention that this so-called sister school schemes could be, you could call it broader school scheme. Doesn't have to be so gender sensitive, but education should be separable from politics. The Secretary said it himself. And yet, he went back on his words. Now he said that he would persuade principal supervisors to support the political reform package, sister school schemes. I think I have political associations with it. the purpose behind is to promote Hong Kong mainland integration. If it's just for interflow, why not go to Taiwan? Why not partner with Thailand, Japan, US, Cambodia, and so forth? But you are now focusing on the mainland market. I will use the word market. So it's obvious that you're trying to promote Hong Kong mainland integration. And then the mothers will become worried about brainwashing, the kids being brainwashed. Would their children be forced to go? And if a school does not participate in the scheme, would it be branded by the Education Bureau as politically incorrect? We're giving you money and yet you're not going on it. Even though you will implement it and over a 3-year period. But, Hong Kong, I know many projects cost to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. $200 billion is not that much, but still it's public money. To me, it's obviously there is political motives behind this educational scheme. Would you admit that you think that you're doing something educational, but in fact you are, first of all, implementing brainwashing education, and secondly, there is a political intention behind? What's your question? Well, I'm not going to ask. Well, I'm finished. Just ask him to respond. Secretary, thank you, members and chairman. First of all, this sister school scheme has been implemented since 2004 by schools on a voluntary basis. The purpose is to enhance. Sorry, I think it stated very clearly in the paper that even though the scheme started in 2004, you are going to promote the breadth and depth of it, to enhance cooperation between sister schools in China and Hong Kong. Why would you like to enhance it? We're talking about $200 billion. What is your question? What drove him to enhance the breadth and depth of the cooperation? Secretary, well, as I said in the beginning, many schools involved in the scheme find it a very effective teaching and learning method. Have you got data? As I said, we started with 20-odd schools. Now there are more than 300 schools, 400 teams. Okay, next one, Gary Fan. Mr. Ng, you are not the head of Education Bureau, but you are the head of Political Education Bureau. In 2012, you tried to force the implementation of national education. Now what you're doing is to actually do away with national education. The basic law teaching materials are very obvious. It just actually copied directly information from the white paper on One Country, Two Systems. Under your leadership, the Education Bureau has implemented policies that is biased towards the mainland. You've tried all effort to promote cooperations between Hong Kong and mainland schools, forcing schools to become sisters. In paragraph 9 in the paper, you said that the objective is to promote professional educational cooperation. But why is it that we only have sister schools between China and Hong Kong? Why do only those schools have the subsidy? Is it that education in the mainland has more reference value than education in other countries? If that's the case, are you reducing the chances of students to go elsewhere for exchanges? Your policy would affect the allocation of resources in schools. And paragraph 8 in your paper, it says that in line with the objectives of particular schools, you will pair schools up with relevant schools on the mainland with the right characteristics. Could you, the Secretary, explain to us, for this lesson observation, exchanges, all these activities, what about the quality of mainland schools? I mean, their quality varies. So on what criteria would you base your decision on which schools to pair up with what? What lessons can we draw from mainland schools? 2 questions, Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. This academic exchange activity is not just limited to the mainland. I've been to Singapore, Indonesia myself. I met with I also went there with teachers and students. And also this latest scheme, because it's related to our neighboring region, therefore we need to actually tie in with the school's direction. As for the characteristics of schools, let me emphasize that all the participation in this scheme is on a voluntary basis. Well, schools participate because they're interested and want to enhance their strengths and complement their whatever they need support in. Let me tell you, in the robotic technology, Hong Kong, there's a school which is actually has a very good job in e-learning. So we can actually help schools complement each other under the scheme. Wong Kok-heng. As for Claudia Mo and Gary Fan's points, I think they tried to attack the sister school scheme, and they brand it as a kind of political ad and political brainwashing. And Gary Fan, he called you the head of the Political Education Bureau. They kept using the reference to the mainland. I think both LegCo members made it very clear. We also made it obvious their political stance, but I'm not going to comment on the political stance. Secretary, I feel that since 2004, sorry, Wong Kok-heng, could you wait? What's the matter, Claudia? I want to ask a question about procedures. Why would he speculate on people's motives? I think that's offensive to me, but you did speculate on the secretary's motive. But nobody complained against me. If you want to complain, you can raise a complaint now. And now I'm making a complaint at this point. Well, he didn't really speculate on your motive. Listen back to what he said. Please continue, Wong Kok-heng. You don't need to listen to me. I just made a judgment that he didn't actually never speculated on your motive. Please continue. I think I don't need to speculate on the motives of you two. It's very obvious. It's obvious to all. Secretary, I think that the government has done something right. In fostering the collaborations or exchanges between schools in Hong Kong and the mainland by becoming sister schools. This is something totally reasonable. As a Chinese, why don't we learn more about our own country? Knowing about our country isn't a sin, right? Hong Kong's education, allows for exchanges with mainland schools. What's wrong with that? I think you two LegCo members, you can actually use labels in reference to the scheme and the secretary. You call him the bureau chief of the Political Education Bureau. You accuse him of political. I think you accuse him of political censorship, and yet you are. But what you say, your stance would not be accepted by the Hong Kong people. Okay, please focus on the sister school scheme, please, Mr. Wong. Well, Chairman, I feel that your doubts are very unfair. Chairman, I'm not steering away from the topic here. I feel that the administration's move is correct. Therefore, I support the administration in its funding allocation request. Now, all these LegCo members who sit before me, from the opposition camp, who are just laughing cunningly, I don't mind. Because I have my own political stance. My stance is that I support the government to do what it should do. I feel that if you are delaying any funding to help with the schools, I think that the administration actually can think about where there's enough money to promote the scheme. I think members in the opposition camp, I know you would object to the funding request. I know they would do it and they would smear you as well, but I do support this funding request. Ip Kin Yuen next. Chairman, as for this sister school scheme, I think if we can turn it into something with two sections, one with the mainland and the other section or element consisting of exchanges with other areas, then that could work. Over the past few years, our educational exchanges in the past few years have been primarily focused on the mainland. this is opposite to the direction on the mainland. If you've noticed, mainland educators, more and more of them, and teachers and students have gone on exchanges on overseas, in overseas countries, Europe and North America, for example. But yet in Hong Kong, we are more and more turning towards the mainland primarily. This actually will have a negative impact on our students' global horizon. If we separate the funding into two parts, 100 million for exchanges with mainland and 100 million for exchanges with other countries, and that would solve the problem. Chairman, this time under this scheme, each school will be given a sum of 120,000 per annum. It's not a big amount. It's not even enough for hiring a teacher. Neither is a small sum. So the question is, what can we do with the $120,000? Can it really resolve the issues facing schools now? I'm worried that ultimately, this sort of funding would indeed create even more workload for schools. You can see clearly from the paper that in paragraph 10, because of the $120,000, school teachers will have to write their look at paragraph 10. Sorry, paragraph 13. They have to write reports for the sake of accountability. So now, if you don't have the money, you can just work according to what resources you have. But now with $120,000, you would have to account for all the expenses incurred under the scheme. Even principals and ICM members, students would actually consider the cost. And all the planning for the exchanges require time. The writing of plans and reports will be done by teachers. So this would only make our teachers even more strained. And the teachers will maybe be forced to outsource the work. And that would lead to even more serious result. Charles Mock. A few years ago, people asked me, if you had children in today's Hong Kong, would you ask them to go to a local school or international school or go overseas? And I was thinking myself, I don't have any children, but I was thinking, maybe it will depend on the family's affordability. Many say that, there's so many problems in local schools, they would rather send the kids to an international school. Or, for the better off, they may send the kids overseas. But now, I see that the government is not addressing real educational issues. I don't need to repeat what they are. And yet they spend money on doing this sister school scheme. And like what some members have said, and these exchanges or sister schools are only set up with mainland schools rather than adopting an open math approach, despite Hong Kong being an international city. Not having exchanges with Taiwan or Macau. So parents have little choice, especially those who do not have the means. So can the parents send their children to international schools? Not necessarily, because many of them just do not have the means. And as Mr. Kim Yun has pointed out, teachers, in fact, are already very busy. They have to cope with a lot of teaching duties. And now there are these resources available, and principals may not want to give up such extra resources, and so they try to secure the resources, and teachers have to make the applications. So if you, I think, ask parents, they will tell you that
schools should concentrate on the academic studies of their children. You know, why are you doing so many extra things, LS, and also interflow between sister schools? Now, Secretary, of course, the objective is to enhance teachers' professionalism and to broaden students' horizon. And we hope to strengthen both teaching and learning. And for the for administrative work that can be dealt with through outsourcing. And we think that this pilot scheme can serve to enhance the effectiveness of teaching and learning. Mr. Leong Kwok Hong. So we are told that in Hong Kong that there was a school very good at computer science, and there was a school in Shenzhen good at robotics. I think this Shenzhen Square has produced people like you. In fact, there was a professor who said that if Hong Kong U students do not want to go on exchange programs in the mainland, they shouldn't have chosen Hong Kong U. But of course, subsequently, he withdrew his remarks. You may think it's cost effective to have exchange programs of the mainland because the fees are lower. And if people go on exchange programs in other countries, of course, it is more expensive. And so if you are providing $200 million for a pilot scheme for exchange of the mainland, then for exchange with the other countries, then you may need to allocate $500 million. You can't give a housewife a small amount of money and expect her to come up with one soup and three dishes for dinner. Concerning forming sister schools with schools in the mainland, I want you to give me a list of the matching and the list of sister schools. There aren't too many secondary schools in Hong Kong. Let's look at how the matching was done. I don't think you are the secretary for brainwashing. You are the secretary for rather sloppy work. You always think you do it first, and you may want to assess the effectiveness only later. So I think you should also provide funding support for interflow between Hong Kong schools and schools in other places. Now, for example, a certain school may want to have some exchange with a school in Thailand, and of course that's more expensive than having interflow with a school in the mainland. You once promoted national education, and no wonder why you think students only go back to their motherland for exchange and interflow. Mr. Ma Fong Kwok. Chairman, I want to say sorry to you, Chairman. I tried to stop members from making unnecessary noise, but I think our members are making the discussion culture in this council worse and worse. I think members should respect themselves, other members, and also the administration and chairman. I think when you chair the meeting, you must not connive at members who shout and yell. I don't agree. I haven't connived at members shouting and yelling. I haven't. All right, Chairman. I know many friends and their children study in schools which have formed sister schools with schools in the mainland. And the feedback from the friends and their children has been very encouraging. Now, some members accused the secretary for having politicized education. Now, I just want to point out that geographically speaking, the mainland is very near to Hong Kong, and there are many things that we need to learn from the mainland. Now, but I think there is one very important concept. Why do we have one country, two systems? This is because during this 50-year transitional period, there should be better understanding between Hong Kong and the mainland in order to facilitate further integration. Now, if we do not prepare our younger generation for further integration, then they won't be able to communicate well and work effectively and get on harmoniously with their mainland compatriots. And so I think such activities are worth worthwhile activities and projects. And in fact, we should be doing more of more work of this kind. So I think we should give schools more autonomy, let them decide on the mode of interflow. And in fact, I understand that some schools are arranging for their students to take part in overseas exchange programs. I think these exchange programs are not mutually exclusive. I just think that we should avoid placing too much pressure and burden on teachers in making applications and filling in forms. We should try to make the application procedures as simple as possible. Ms. Helena Wong. Now, according to the paper, Chairman, the scheme for forming sister schools started in 2004, but we still haven't received any assessment report from the Education Bureau on the forming of sister schools between Hong Kong schools and mainland schools. And without an assessment from the Education Bureau, we don't know whether it's worth further promoting this idea. So we want to have a detailed assessment report from the Education Bureau on the effectiveness of having sister schools. And then I'm concerned about para 14 and 16. It is said that a local school can enjoy a high degree of autonomy in choosing the sister school in the mainland and in deciding the mode of interflow and exchange. But then concerning the service provider, we don't know which organization will provide the service, and we do not know the fees required. From 2009 to August last year, there were 3 contracts amounting to $1.7 million, and they were all awarded to the Federation of Teachers Unions. So concerning the $200 million pilot project, is it that the Federation of Teachers Unions will enjoy a monopoly? Now, we all understand the Federation's political inclinations. So so will there be open bidding, or is it that there will only be one service provider? If only the Federation will be the service provider, no wonder why people suspect that these interflow activities are for brainwashing. I think I'll invite Mrs. Hong, the Deputy Secretary, to reply. Chairman, let me clear up some misunderstanding. In fact, previously, we followed government's procurement procedures. And we invited organizations to bid for the service. And in fact, every time we fully complied with government regulations, it was coincidence that every time the same organization won the bid. In fact, in the several bidding exercises, in each of them, there were more than one bidders. So is it that in future there will only be there will be the same successful bidder in the federation? Now, I just want to say that previously there were more than one bidder on each occasion, but of course we don't know which bidder will win the bid. But then if there is only one organization providing the service, then if it's not brainwashing, what is it? Mr. Kenneth Chan, now saying Hong Kong is a cosmopolitan city and we should go international. We should have exchange programs in Asia, in Australia, in Europe, in the US. I think students should be given such opportunities. Now, in university, students can choose exchange internships in the mainland, in Europe, and in the US. Now, do you know why this pilot project is so controversial? That is because you are only giving $120,000 a year to schools, sending students to the mainland. So although these are sisters, I think money is required to establish the closer ties. And I want to say that this paper doesn't contain detailed information. There are 7 pages, but then it contains little concrete information. Maybe the secretary started asking his staff collect the information when he knew that he would have to come to LegCo to introduce the pilot scheme to members. And he only said that one school was good at robotics and one school was good at mechanical science, and so they formed a perfect pair. And in fact, when representatives or students from the sister schools come to Hong Kong, then the sister school in Hong Kong has to pay for the accommodation and other expenses, and the money will also come from this funding. And a few weeks ago, there were reports about another scheme, another exchange program with the mainland. A member of the committee organized or set up a company, and the activities were organized, or many of the activities were organized by the company. So will people set up companies to do matchmaking, to do the pairing up, and to draft proposals for the schools and then pocket the government's funding? We need openness, fairness and transparency, and these are not slogans. You have to put these concepts into practice, and I think the Education Bureau should encourage the forming of sister schools between Hong Kong schools as well as schools in other parts of the world, not only schools in the mainland. Ms. N. Chang, yes, Mr. Kenneth Chang said that we should form sister schools with schools in different parts of the world. Yes, of course, it's a good idea, but the amount of funding available is limited, and if our students go to the mainland, then the cost is lower, even if the students have to take a plane or take a train. And concerning promoting interflow between sister schools in Hong Kong and the mainland, I think it's a good idea. Now, Secretary, Mr. Ip Kin Yun, the Deputy Chairman, said that the teachers would have a lot of work to do when schools submitted applications. for the scheme. So if the teachers are really too busy, so can the schools decide not to apply for funding under the pilot scheme? And then what if parents do not want their students to their children to join? So do they have a choice?
This is a voluntary arrangement. If a school finds that there isn't a suitable school to pair up with, or if the teachers are too busy with the exam, then the school does not need to participate. If that's the case, Secretary, then I think that's something good. You know, we've been part of China for so many years, and today's youth, they have not yet a chance to go outside of Hong Kong. If they can have exchange with mainland schools, find out more about the mainland, I think that's something good. It's just another chance for them. And also it's up to them to decide whether to go or not. I don't see anything wrong with it. I don't see why some pan-democrat legislators have such a strong reaction to the scheme. They should review. They should have actually a reassessment of themselves. They could have gone to Shenzhen for exchanges. I mean, they have money and they can go on exchanges. Don't forget that for many grassroots children, the families cannot afford to send them away. And now the government is providing a recurring grant of 120,000 per school per annum. So that's the kind of support. Say if there are schools who don't want to join, well, it's up to them. I think that we should be fair and give our next generation the chance to see more of the place around us. If Hong Kong has more money or revenues, then I wouldn't rule out that. I wouldn't rule out as kind of chance that getting our students go to various countries around the world for exchanges. So I support the scheme. Thank you. This one is Sid Ho. Thank you, Chairman. Just then, Mrs. Hong Chen-Chui-Wah, Deputy Secretary for Education, trying to defend the government's tendering system. I don't know if she remembers that the e-learning support scheme for underprivileged families, well, the scoring system was flawed and its credibility was undermined. And ultimately, the organization that won the tender actually had their qualification revoked. So how fair is your tendering or tender scheme? I do support with many exchanges, whether with the mainland or the international community. Exchanges help students see more of the world. But I'd like to ask, why don't you let schools invite tenders themselves? We always say that we should give schools more room for autonomy. Schools would indeed follow the rules set by ICAC. So why can't we open up the whole service arrangement instead of having the government centralizing all the entire tender procedures or process? Chairman, I know the scheme has been around for some time. Can the Secretary give us some information on the sister schools? Are we partnering with mainland schools in mountainous areas, remote poor areas, so that Hong Kong students can see more of poverty in China? Or are we partnering schools with, partnering with rich schools in large cities, schools with very luxury or expensive complexes? Well, even if you want students in Hong Kong who may go to international schools, who come from privileged families, we can give them a chance to see what poor families are like on the mainland. You need to give us the information or data. If you can't, then we don't see over the past few years what have you achieved through the scheme. Secretary? Thank you, Member, for your question. I'd like to make 2 points here. On the last point, schools do have the autonomy in choosing the school to partner with. And I've seen some rich schools in Hong Kong choosing to partner with schools in remote areas to let the students share experiences. and also they can introduce to the mainland schools the situation in Hong Kong. I like to emphasize, for example, in if schools want to enhance certain subjects, the students' performance in certain subjects like maths, they will also choose to partner with the right school to them. Okay, Chairman, can he explain further on why he can't let schools to invite tenders themselves? Okay, next one, Leung Yu-chung. Members said under one country, two systems, it's necessary to have the exchanges with the mainland to help students understand more about China. But if that's the case, I think the Secretary should just state it clearly that this is intended to help people know about China. And yet in paragraph 5, it doesn't present the same picture, because it's written here that the scheme include school visits, lesson observations, evaluation, variety shows, debate competitions, parent seminars, student pen pal schemes, and so forth. Chairman, if the schemes involves all these, then this is not really about understanding China. This is something related to teaching and learning, as the Secretary mentioned, right? Teaching and learning related. So is it that the Secretary put it this way because it wants to avoid giving the impression that it's a kind of national education? So are these wordings a kind of, just for show? I think the Secretary, need to be clear about it. And also I don't think we should just look at China alone. Hong Kong's curriculum is not tied with that in the mainland. You might actually cause teachers and students here to be confused. Most, for our curriculum development here is tied in with that in other countries, particularly Australia. So, if you want to enhance teaching and learning, for example, as you mentioned, having activities, lesson observations, evaluation, that may not suit the Hong Kong context. So that would actually be difficult for teachers and students to handle indeed. But if you say that you want the schools to understand mainland China, China's culture, then that's fine. But you better state that clearly. Just be frank what you're trying to do. So I'd like to ask the Secretary, under the sister scheme, what's your real purpose? Can you actually be very clear? What's the purpose of the scheme? Well, there's several purposes. One is to foster exchanges between schools in Hong Kong and the mainland, and foster mutual learning amongst teachers in Hong Kong and China, and also broaden the horizon of Hong Kong students, and also broaden students' cultural understanding. Well, if you are trying to achieve these purposes through the activities in paragraph 5, can he be more specific? Well, I know you don't trust what he's saying, but please listen. Well, exchanges are that are intended that the schools can develop long-term relationships. Next one is Yip Kwok Him. I need to declare my interest. I'm the vice chairman of an educational organization. My school has also participated in the sister school scheme. I don't know whether my school will benefit, but I've just declared my interest. Leung Yu-chung read out from paragraph 5 just then. And indeed, in the second half of that paragraph, makes it very clearly that there's a purpose in, achieving a better understanding about China. You need to read the paper very carefully. Hong Kong is an international city, but it's also a special administrative region, in the PRC. Enhancing Hong Kong people's understanding of the country is appropriate. I do support this sister school scheme. Since there is this one country, two system, Hong Kong students may not have actually enough understanding about the mainland, but through the sister school scheme, then there is the advantage. And I also know that schools I know, and I find that the students in those schools have learned a lot from their trips in China. As for Sometimes I find it very regretful that, like someone just mentioned, why is why some organizations like end up being involved in running similar schemes. And Hong Kong Federation of Educational Workers was always given the chance to be involved because of its own political stance. But how about the Professional Teachers Union? PTU also got involved in several activities. I think that the comment made was an insult to the educational bodies or professional bodies. We are professional bodies and we have our own professional ethics and code of conduct. If you challenge or adopt the ethics of the professional groups, I think you are politicizing things. And that's something that should not be accepted. And particularly, I think some of our electrical members should not have said such shameful things. Now we are doing something, trying to do something properly to actually foster the scheme through the funding request. I hope the Secretary, though, to answer us on the question that now you are promoting the exchanges or interflow between schools. Are you trying to help Hong Kong students understand more about the mainland? Next one, Starry Lee. Chairman, I think being sister schools has been something that's been around. I mean, for the tertiary sector, it's very common for institutions, to set up partnerships. And many university students indeed go on exchanges during their 4-year study or tertiary study, and they tended to go overseas. So I don't know what did LegCo discuss back then? Why did the tertiary students here only go to overseas countries more instead of the mainland? So please don't be biased against exchanges on the mainland. I've noticed that schools in the school sector, more schools have set up alliances or organized exchanges on the mainland. We need to understand Hong Kong and China and the world through various forms of exchanges. Just then, some colleagues said that going on overseas exchanges or creating ties with overseas institutions are normal, and yet going to the mainland is a kind of brainwashing. I find it very, I'm really opposed to such thinking. This reflects that people tend to view that system in China is inferior to that overseas. Why is there no problem with going overseas? You can have brainwashing overseas as well. So I think exchanges on the mainland, as someone in Hong Kong, don't think we understand Chinese culture very well. If you should know that indeed Hong Kong people should learn about mainland culture and learn to get along with people on the mainland, according to their practices. It's something that we should know and learn about. All along, we've emphasized that schools should have autonomy. If you say that such a small amount of money, and I don't think schools would just give up on its autonomy for a small sum of money. So I think we need to look at it as that's something that this is something to promote exchange with the mainland. It's no different from the Guangdong or Fujian scheme, allowing Hong Kong elderly people in Hong Kong to move back to the mainland. We hope that it's the same concept. It's the same concept here. So we hope that we can do more to indeed try to help Hong Kong and China complement each other, whether it's for education, young people, or in other areas. Next one is Tam Yu Chong.
Chairman, In fact, forming sister schools with mainland schools is not anything new. This started in 2004, and in fact, there are now 300 pairs of sister schools between Hong Kong and the mainland. The CE wants to give further assistance and support to these schools. And that's why there is this pilot scheme. Now, in fact, schools took the initiative to form sister schools with schools in the mainland. Initially, the number was, of course, fewer than 300. And then more and more Hong Kong schools formed sister schools with schools in the mainland. And the government has decided to give some support to these schools. We're only talking about $120,000 a year. This is a very small amount of money only. It's just a token of support and assistance. And I think the mindset of some members who spoke is problematic. They resent and reject the mainland. This is really problematic. And I think the principals and the teachers of these 300 schools may also lament the attitude of these electrical members. Why is it that these members all think that anything associated with the mainland is bad and substandard and smacks of brainwashing? And there are many members who think that only international schools in Hong Kong are good, while local schools are full of defects. You know, the teachers are so dedicated. They've done such a lot to try to provide quality education service to our children, and so we should not be trampling on these local schools, so to speak. And you know, teachers don't mind doing extra work that will benefit the students. In fact, every year there are teachers in Hong Kong who teach English, who are willing to go to the mainland during the summer holidays to teach mainland students English free of charge. So it is not that teachers only do work for their pay. And I think we must appreciate the contributions of our teachers. Mr. Michael Tian, Chairman. Some say that this pilot scheme is a brainwashing exercise. Now, many Hong Kong students have joined exchange programs in the mainland, and they have told me that they have meals together with mainland students, and they watch the flag raising ceremonies, and so they do not think that there is any brainwashing at all. But then I think my concern is that students just regard these as a tour, just a tour to spend a holiday. Now, so if the Hong Kong students go there and sing the national anthem, then in fact they can do so in Hong Kong. There's no need for them to go to the mainland to do these things. But I know that some schools have tried to make the best out of the sister school arrangement. For one school, it sent students to the school, and the students attended handicraft lessons, pottery lessons, and they were extremely interested and enthusiastic. And for mainland students coming to visit their sister school in Hong Kong, they are mainly interested in English lessons and the learning of English. And so I think, in fact, the two sides can complement each other's strength, and both sides stand to benefit. Now, my question is this. We want the interflow activities to be effective, and so there must be a clear objective for our students when they visit the sister school in the mainland. And I hope that schools will not just say that they want to promote mutual understanding and promote friendship between the students of the two schools. I think there must be very specific objectives laid down. For example, the sister school in the mainland has certain strengths which are helpful to local students, and so local students will go there to benefit from those strengths. 15 seconds, Secretary. Now, yes, this will be done, and we hope that there will be a continuous interflow. For example, Chinese enhancement. We hope that students can learn Tang poetry more effectively when they visit the mainland. Ms. Priscilla, when I met the Financial Secretary, I only gave one comment. I said that in fact it was more useful to walk 10,000 miles and tour around than studying 10,000 books. And so I support schemes of this sort. In 2005, I led some students on a delegation to Beijing, and one student in fact was from Tuen Mun, and he told me that he was extremely grateful to have the opportunity to visit Beijing and to leave Tuen Mun, because in fact he had all along been in Tuen Mun and hadn't been to anywhere else. In fact, I have joined 3 interflow programs before. I think knowing how others learn is already good learning. I led a delegation to a boarding school in Zhangcheng. We were there during the weekend. The students were extremely hardworking, and the students were mainly from the rural areas. They said that they treasured the opportunity to study in such a good school. They said that 90% of the graduates of the school would be able to get into the best universities in the mainland. And, our students were extremely touched. So we did not always go to visit the poor schools, so to speak. Some schools and students visited premier schools in Beijing and Shanghai, and they said that that was an eye-opener. They said that they used to think that China was very poor, and the students were poor and wore dirty clothes. But then when they went there, they knew that in fact there was much to learn from schools and students in the mainland. So I don't think there is a need to specify what students need to learn when they go to the mainland. Let them have a happy experience. They can spend a happy time there. They can know or make more friends in the mainland, and so very naturally the ties will grow, and 10 years later these people will become good partners in economic development. Mr. Chen Chi-chun. Now, some members adopt a very simple logic and mindset. They think that as we query this scheme, we are against anything that has to do with the mainland. I agree with Mr. Ip Kin Yoon. in the mainland, they are sending students to different places in the world. And yet in Hong Kong, we only want to send our students to the mainland for exchange programs. We are forming sister schools with schools in the mainland. And then Mr. Kim Yun said that the SAR had a duty to know more about the mainland. So is it that he thinks that if students do not join the programs, they should not be allowed to graduate? We are worried that national education may be outsourced, and national education may revive outside Hong Kong. You know, some parents are extremely worried. They do not want their children to be brainwashed. They are extremely worried, and I think they have good reasons for being worried. Yes, it's true that this is only a pilot scheme at this stage, and the schools can apply on a voluntary basis. But then, there is always some peer pressure. If other schools join a pilot scheme, then a school may feel some pressure. And then is it that the arrangements are reciprocal? In other words, is it that we will only export students to the mainland schools, or is it that the mainland schools will also send their students to Hong Kong? Now, in fact, we're talking about a two-way interflow, complementing each other's strengths, and we hope that the relationship can be a lasting one. So we are not only talking about just one or two meetings. And then just now I talked about robotics. In fact, the students are extremely interested. No, I'm not talking about individual cases, Chairman. Say if we send 100 Hong Kong students to a sister school for interflow, is it that the sister school will also reciprocate the arrangement and send 100 students for interflow and exchange to Hong Kong? It's up to the schools to decide. Schools, parents, students will all enjoy interflow opportunities. So the last member to ask questions, Lam Tai Fai, Secretary. Hong Kong is a pluralistic community, and of course in this council there are different views held by different members. Now some support this pilot scheme, some oppose the scheme, some would like to embrace the scheme, some are worried, and so you can see that there are really different views about the scheme. I have to declare interest. I am the supervisor of a DSS secondary school, and my school may take part in the scheme, and so I really must declare my interest. I am responsible for the operation of a school sponsoring body, and of course schools must take into account the interests of the students. In fact, we in the education field must proceed with the best interests of students in mind, and we must not regard students as chips. Now, we want students to broaden their horizon. We want students to be able to know more about what is happening outside Hong Kong. But of course, the approach must be correct, or else the a project will not be effective. And my experience tells me that we in the education sector must be pragmatic. We must not just chant empty slogans. We have to be sincere, and I have no objection to the scheme. In fact, I support the pilot scheme, but I don't think we should just be seeking to increase the number of schools under the pilot scheme. $120,000 is not a big sum of money. Say if a school has 600 students, then we're only talking about 200 students per school per year. And if there are 800 students in the school, then it's only $150 per student per annum. And that's not even enough to buy an express railway ticket for a student. So I want to say that the school will have to put in much more money, much more time, much more effort. And as these are sister schools, we attach importance to the nurturing of the ties between the sisters. We hope that the relationship can be long-lasting. And this pilot scheme will only be for a 3-year period. And I think $120,000 is really not enough. All right, I'll have to abide by the time limit as well. And so there's no need for you to reply, Secretary.
Okay, back to my question, why schools are not given the autonomy? Sylvia? Yeah, can you answer? Yeah, thank you, Chairman. In response to your question, if schools want to invite tenders, then they need to follow the Education Bureau mechanism. So can they? Yes, not just the Federation of Education Workers can apply, NGOs can apply. I mean, keep letting schools do it. Yeah, schools can. Yeah, invite tenders. Okay, I'd like to consult members on this $200 million pilot scheme. Members, do you support it? Should we support the funding request to be put to the Finance Committee? No objection? Okay. Right. Next item. Progress of implementing the support scheme on e-learning in schools and the e-textbook market development scheme. Paper CB4 925/14-1503. Secretary, would you take us through the paper? Anyone who wants to speak, please raise your hands. Okay, please just raise one hand, not two hands. May I wait for my colleagues? Yeah, I'd like to wait for my colleagues. Yes, okay, our time is limited. Okay, please hurry up. Okay, I can start now. As for the support scheme on e-learning in schools and e-textbook market development scheme, as for the progress, I think the paper gives you the details. I just want to highlight a few points here. Firstly, the support scheme, having heard your views, well, we actually had a target of 100 schools. Most of them had completed the first year of participation. What's encouraging is all had put in place Wi-Fi infrastructure, Wi-Fi design, and also gone on to the second stage of e-learning. And last time you asked about the 40 schools with limited resources, and you asked whether they could join this scheme. I can tell you that the initial obstacles have been overcome, and after a year's work, the schools have actually made similar progress as the remaining 80 schools. And thirdly, members were concerned about manpower in schools. In the past, we've heard about, hardware problems and so forth. But after the implementation of the support scheme, more than 90% of the schools are now have rented out Wi-Fi services, including maintenance and repair. And that has actually greatly eased the concern. And lastly, in applications, individual schools have begun applying IT, not just in the main subjects, but also other subjects. Some other schools have made much more progress, have even come out to help others. So I think it's good to have 100 schools involved already. But in the days ahead, we hope that there will be 900 more schools will come on board the scheme. And I hope that the Finance Committee can approve the funding required. Thank you. So members, those who've raised your hands include James Tang, Charles Mok, Sari Lee, Sid Ho, Lang Ko Hong, Lam Tai Fai. The first one is Michael Tian. Chairman, the Education Bureau set up Wi-Fi infrastructure and other hardware for schools. These are actually score-winning gestures. But how are we going to enhance the effectiveness of e-learning? The Hong Kong U survey last year actually released the results of a survey which showed that Hong Kong students left behind Australia, South Korea, and Germany in their application of e-learning because teachers had problems in IT education. It's not that they don't have the computer hardwares or support wares. It's because the teachers had no time nor incentives to incorporate IT into teaching and learning. So now you've set up more and more hardware, but what can we expect from it? How can we give teachers the time and incentives to prepare the lessons well? You have a car, but if they don't use it, what's the point of buying it? Earlier on, I suggested that we could had a pilot scheme on flipped classroom. Some teachers who've used the flipped classroom approach said that, well, the basic concept of it is that teachers would prepare lessons beforehand and shoot some videos, of them explaining the content, and then students would watch the videos, animated videos with voice and visuals beforehand. But that's more interesting to teachers than to students than just reading from textbooks. And then students, when they go to the class, they will discuss what they've seen. Well, I find that despite all the talk about interactive learning in classroom, often, what goes on in the classroom is very one-dimensional. And by the second year after the flipped classroom approach was used, and teachers didn't spend as much time on preparing the materials. And also, they've noticed a marked improvement in students' performance. So I think flipped classroom is one thing that the administration can consider, to be used in class that use IT. So I'd like to ask you, would you consider proactively, help teachers with preparing for the lessons or adopting this approach? If teachers are not prepared about preparing it, you can provide some demonstrations for teachers and share some experiences with them. Secretary, yeah, I think that's a good approach. In schools with a strong foundation in IT learning, they are doing that. I've visited 2 schools, indeed. Okay, next one is Charles Mock. Chairman, the Wi-Fi 100 project. I don't know why Wi-Fi 100 had to be put together with IT learning. You have to develop the infrastructure no matter what anyway. But do you know that of the schools in the Wi-Fi 100, how many of them are using the e-textbooks or e-maths scheme? Can you tell us the figure? I also discussed with the teachers lately on e-learning materials. Well, to be brief, I think the teachers have one request. That is, they don't see there any incentive for schools to use e-maths textbooks because there wouldn't be special resources allocated to the schools to procure the materials. There isn't enough incentive for them. And there aren't that many choices either. You've just developed, the materials in 2 stages. Secretary, firstly, the Wi-Fi 100 has just started, and e-maths have only developed 20 sets of teaching materials, so we don't have the data yet. And secondly, on e-maths, the A part, there are 26 sets of teaching materials available. The initial feedback we got is that they're using the materials on a trial basis, and they find that they need to consider they are getting used to using local teaching materials, and secondly, they like local materials because they are produced by local developers, not by the third party. Therefore, we still have to find out more about the usage of these materials. There are 6 to 8 sets of materials being made now, and in addition to other new e-learning materials or e-materials developed by textbook producers, that will actually make the platform more widely used. Secretary, I hope that by the beginning of the next academic year, you can provide us with the data. I'm sure you'll make decisions before the beginning of the next term. You don't need to wait for the school to have installed Wi-Fi 100 or 900 to be able to use the e-materials. Schools can access the internet anyway. So I think that both e-learning and the Wi-Fi infrastructure do not have to be are not necessarily tied to each other. You have to provide the incentives, financial incentives for schools, so they can invest not just in the Wi-Fi infrastructure, but they also need to have the money to buy the e-textbooks. You need to give them resources. Next one's Darrell. Chairman, I'd like to ask the Secretary, what's the purpose of promoting e-learning? I've been going through the materials, the papers before us. But what's your positioning? Are they there to help to enhance teaching and learning, to support teaching, or as we were talking about ways to reduce textbook prices? It seems that judging from the progress made so far, I don't think they can in any way reduce textbook prices. I find that it seems to me that the e-learning seems to perform an assistive role only. There hasn't been any reduction in the amount of textbooks being used. Teachers just ask them to maybe go online, learn online, just to get more interactions. So what kind of objective do you have in implementing the e-learning scheme, Secretary? I think on different occasions we've discussed this issue already. We don't hope that e-learning is confined to only 1 to 2 schemes. And secondly, we hope that e-learning can help enhance teaching and learning through new technology. And thirdly, more importantly, is that we hope that it will increase students' learning autonomy. And fourthly, to encourage exchanges between students and teachers and among students, not just having exchanges within the classroom. Okay, so simply put, you haven't thought of using the e-learning or materials to reduce textbook prices. And also, have you, through your exchanges with overseas, have you found out about the use of e-learning materials in Hong Kong in comparison with other countries? Are we lagging behind or what? Well, when it comes to various indicators, Hong Kong is like in the upper middle stream. We've got all the basic infrastructure because in the past, we focused a lot on the e-textbooks. Pricing is just one issue. But through e-textbooks, people can get more interactions and also access new information more easily. Next one is Sid Ho. In 2008, we discussed, follow-up actions on textbook prices. And the textbook prices have stabilized for some time, but still, the materials, teaching materials, supplementary exercises, or, textbooks that are reprinted, with only minor changes, have continued to exist. And then we have the e-materials. I'm sure I can find from the paper that they'll need price guarantees for 2 to 4 years, when it comes to textbook prices. This is something that responds to the, something to do with the supply market. And textbook prices can go up very soon, easily. And for the schools that have not yet got the hardware infrastructure. Of course, I hope that we can speed up the process, that each school will only require $300,000 to upgrade its infrastructure. It's like, we said that the $120,000 for the sister school scheme isn't much. So can you try to get more resources from the government to settle the infrastructure in 2 years? And also agree with what members said. We don't just want the hardware. We have to be able to use what's available. If you have the infrastructure and yet there aren't any teachers who can really implement interactive learning, so it's like buying a Rolls Royce for someone without a driving license.
And so, concerning the training of teachers, the sharing of resources, what are you going to do? Secretary. Chairman, concerning Wi-Fi 900, now 400 schools have proposed to join in the second year. But then she wants to know how you're going to use the resources. I think Dr. Chan can answer the question about training. Yes, Chairman. Now we do have centers of teaching excellence, and so teachers can share their experience with other teachers, and we also have continuous learning support for teachers, and we also provide funding for principals to manage the systems. But then will you carry out tracking surveys? Yes, this is going to be one of the components of the fourth plan. When we do that, we haven't got funding support from or funding approval from the FC yet. So when will you be able to release the report? And I think we should be talking about the academic year 2016. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong. Chairman. Of course, we don't want e-textbooks to become too expensive. I say, if I have a book here. I'm a student. I want to read this book. Where can I get it? Where can I find it? You either you give me money or the school give me the account username and the PIN to access the book. Concerning learning by Wi-Fi, I may not get the book in the library. I may not be able to buy the book. So can I have access to the books, say on through Wi-Fi, say on the French Revolution? No. So as Secretary, please be frank. You simply don't have the money to do it. Our funding for education is not enough. And you have to do so many things, including forming sister schools with schools in the mainland. So the e-textbooks will become more expensive into 2 to 4 years' time. So can you promise us that there will be a pricing commitment of, say, 10 years? And if you can't give this commitment, so how can you make sure that students can afford the e-textbook? So can you give a 10-year pricing commitment? Secretary, Chairman. Because of the number of students in Hong Kong and because of other factors, textbooks, of course, need to be updated every year, and so their prices do go up. There's inflation, the staff have to have pay rise. All right, anyway, I don't need further replies from him. I'll give my comment. So the original objective is to make sure that textbook prices will not go up, and you can't guarantee that. So what's the purpose? If you are unwilling to buy me a bicycle, there's no use promising to buy me a Ferrari later. Right? Albert Ho and Kenneth Chan, and also Lam Tai Fai. Mr. Albert Ho, the response is not really too good. Only 100 schools have taken part in the scheme. And I think sooner or later, this e-environment has to be made available in schools. So what's the problem at the moment? Is it that the teachers haven't received adequate training? What are the concerns of the schools? And how can we try to get more schools to take part in the scheme so that schools will be equipped with the infrastructure to facilitate e-learning by students? Secretary, now in fact, e-learning is being practiced in some schools. So members can visit some schools, and in the Wi-Fi 900, about 900 schools are waiting for the devices. Now, because for downloading, speed is the essence, and Wi-Fi 900 is really the first step. And Chairman, in the past few years, we provided training for teachers. There were seminars. Over 3,000 teachers took part in some seminars. Over 8,000 teachers took part in exhibitions and also exchange sessions. So we have been upgrading the capacity of teachers. We've encouraged exchange among local teachers and also exchange with overseas teachers. Teachers, of course, do need adequate support, and so for schools which have moved forward faster, they are willing to share their experience with other schools in the same district. Secretary, do you agree that the number of schools participating is on the low side? Because you're providing each school $300,000. What do you mean by the low participation rate? Which scheme? Concerning the support scheme on e-learning in schools, now we have to have the consent of teachers, parents. At that time, about 170 schools applied. But then, in fact, schools knew very well that the first batch would comprise about 100 schools, and there would be other schools covered in later phases. So it is not that the schools had reservations. We said that in the initial stage we would cover 100 schools, and 170 schools applied. Kenneth Chan. This paper, Chairman, is about the support scheme on e-learning in schools and the e-MATS, e-textbook market development scheme. Concerning the support scheme on e-learning in schools, last year, when we discussed the subject, I asked which telecommunication and internet companies would be hired to upgrade the Wi-Fi infrastructure for the schools selected. And if you can't give us the information today, please give us the paper later, because we do not want to see monopolies enjoyed by dominant telecommunications companies. We do not want one or two companies to monopolize the market. So we hope to have a list of the companies providing the service. We do not want the scheme to benefit just one or two companies or providers. And then concerning the EMATs, I think as at this stage, I think it's still rather difficult to promote the use of e-textbooks. Now, I in fact like reading books. I am conservative. I'm a conservative person. I like a physical book. I like to hold a book and read it. But times have changed, and times have changed a bit. Only, Chairman. So some publishers are interested in joining the e-textbook market, and they think that they will they can launch e-textbooks at a lower price than physical textbooks, and the profit is still theirs. And that's not really a very healthy phenomenon. I think government must closely monitor the surge in textbook prices. Now, I understand that you intend to bring in competition in promoting the e-textbook market, and I really hope that the government will not be deceiving itself, and that the e-textbook publishers will be the same publishers of physical textbooks, and ultimately prices are still controlled by them. You don't need a reply? No. Mr. Leung Yu Chong. Now, the printed textbooks are really too expensive. You know, there have to be updated editions for printed textbooks, and the publishers all say that printing costs are very high. So I really don't know whether it's really so difficult to develop e-textbooks, as the content is already in the printed textbooks. And I really don't understand why it's going to be very expensive to update the content of e-textbooks. I don't think so. So why is it that there is only this pricing commitment of 2 to 4 years? And then it is said that e-textbooks are generally priced about 20% lower than their printed counterparts. Why is the difference so small, only about 20%? In fact, we want e-textbooks to be much cheaper, and also for e-textbooks it will be easier to update the content. But the price difference is so small. What's the use of developing e-textbooks, and what's the meaning of, or what is the significance of developing e-textbooks if the difference is so small in terms of pricing? Secretary, yes, I understand that members want to see e-textbooks launched. Now, in fact, our objective is to make sure that the existing publishers will not be monopolizing the e-textbook market, and that's why we have NGOs and tertiary institutions joining the market. You know, for e-textbooks, of course, the initial development cost is rather high. But then when the platform is there, then the cost will be much lower. And if we just compare the PDF cost with the printed cost, then that will not help to bring down the cost of e-textbooks. And in fact, schools will be encouraged to try using the e-textbooks to propose enhancement. But then the government provided a subsidy for the development of e-textbooks. Why is it that the price will only be 20% lower than the printed textbooks? All right, it's my turn. So maybe the market is not big enough, and as a result, it may not be an attractive idea to publishers or to develop this market. Now we have the 4 core subjects, and many all students take these subjects. But then for electives, the situation is very uncertain. For some electives, they may become unpopular, and some electives may even be scrapped. And I think that's one of the hurdles in the way concerning the development of e-textbooks. And then second, the government wants the Wi-Fi infrastructure to be upgraded in all 1,000 schools. Of course, this is good. And then in future, schools use tablets or other computing devices to learn. In fact, I have visited many schools and I have talked to many experienced principals and teachers. And with regard to TSS, technical service support, at the moment, it's not a permanent post. But the schools want the post to become a permanent one. In future, say if all schools launch e-textbooks and e-learning, then there must be standing TSS, and the support service can't be outsourced because students have to use the devices on a daily basis. And I think money that needs to be spent has to be spent. We need to invest generously in education. Outsourcing and the procurement of services are not feasible in the eyes of the principals. Almost 100% of them think there should be a permanent TSS post. So can you try to adopt such a suggestion?
Yes, I will listen to various views. I'm listening to various views. The 2 views I got was that, schools told us that they want to have designated personnel. And then they also said that based on their past experience, these people would leave 6 months after they started their job, even if it's a permanent job, because you haven't made this a permanent job. So don't assume that once it's been made permanent, then people will leave. They told us that some schools had talked to the staff who were left and asked them why. Next item, well, time's up. Next item. Secretary, are you going to stay on? Okay, next item is capital works projects for school. I think paragraph 5 in the paper, the Wi-Fi list, maybe please ask them to provide us with the secretary. Yes, okay. Okay, next item is capital works projects for school. Paper CB4 925/14-1504. Let's invite the administration to come in. Kevin Young, Undersecretary. Well, we've got all the papers with us. Would you need to have a brief introduction? Well, it's up to you. I think the papers are pretty straightforward. Maybe let's just go into the Q&A. Okay, just for the sake of efficiency. Okay, members who want to speak, please raise your hands. Okay, 3. Wong Pik Wan, Kenneth Chan, Albert Ho. Okay, 3 minutes for question and answer. Wong Pik Wan, first. Chairman, I don't want to concentrate on the highlight estate school first. I'd just like to ask, in some old public housing estates, the schools there, primary or secondary schools that have been there for 40 or 60 years, when they are redeveloped, what criteria would the Education Bill use to decide when they can be redeveloped or reprovisioned? What are the criteria? Can you name the school? No, I just don't want to name particular school. I just want to ask, well, but today's item focuses on 2 schools here. I'm asking about the policy. Well, I'm not. Can you let him answer, try to answer? Under Secretary, are you talking about special school or mainstream schools? Well, I'm referring to just ordinary schools or ordinary schools in housing estates. Well, for ordinary mainstream schools, we do have a bidding process. If there is in a new site that can be made available for reprovisioning school, then there's a bidding process. If they want to be redeveloped in situ, then we'll have to look at the years, how old the school is, its environment and teaching quality, and whether technically it can be redeveloped. If the plot ratio is small, say if the size is less than 3,000 square meters, then we would not redevelop the school in situ. So those are the factors we'll consider. I think I'll need to consult members on whether you support the referral of the funding request to the Public Works Subcommittee. So please focus on these 2 schools. Policy issues, they are important, but I think on this item we're supposed to focus on the schools. Any other members who want to speak, I'll draw a line. Leung Kwok-hong. Okay, I'll draw a line here. Kenneth Chan, Upper Home, Charles Mock, and Leung Kwok-hong. Kenneth Chan first. Just then, Wong Pik Wen asked a question that actually letters I sent to the administration earlier. I asked about schools built in the 1980s, that resemble matchbox. And the administration came back and told me that there are 18 of such matchbox schools. But I'm pleased with the that you gave us the data in your reply. Now you said there are 28 of them in existence. So I will urge the chairman to consider when the time comes to ask the administration to tell us the information about these old-style schools. If they do not comply with the modern-day standards, how we can enhance the school complexes, whether through redevelopment or not. And please ask them to give us a timetable and help with our future discussion on it by providing relevant information. So please, Chairman, arrange a time for us to discuss that. So on this particular item, the school in Sham Shui Po, about 2 years ago, we actually helped with a school in Tuen Mun. That case is of reference value. We found that there was an issue with how to draw the line, and the school sponsoring body then found that in reprovisioning the school, they had to deal with trees and other unexpected problems, and they sought help from us. So please just remind the administration here that when you carry out with this reconstruction projects, please let the schools know what areas they would need to pay attention to, and please let them know about the all the potential issues that could come up. And let's try to avoid wasting public resources, time and energy, and also not to disappoint parents as well. And in Tanner Hill, in the Eastern District site, can I ask the administration to give us some more information on the traffic assessment for the Eastern District? If the 2 schools there in Eastern District are built, then the narrow down, which is quite narrow, the road, which is quite narrow there. What can you do to ease the load on the traffic? And also, the paper also says that there will be the 2 schools in Tanner Hill, and when you redraw the boundaries of the schools, then district boundaries, then there could be oppositions. Now, if there's school moving from Wan Chai to Quarry Bay or Eastern District, then would there be any oppositions? So you have to be mindful of that. Next one is Albert Ho. I do support these suggestions and requests, particularly for the relocation of the special school or construction of the special school. Sometimes if you build a school for mentally disabled, I don't know whether the district council faced opposition, but there may be difficulties. So the administration must stand firm in its principle that it should not allow any, district councillors, endorse any discrimination against underprivileged people. There could be some practical issues concerned, like this Shamship Ho School. Well, why would it accept students from as far away as Cheung Kwan O? I don't quite see why. For mentally disabled children, what sort of transportation arrangement is available for them? Undersecretary, Chairman, I think the District Council does support our plan. On January 13, we did consult the Shamship Ho District Council. There's no opposition from them. And as for the district itself, we've said that for special school planning, we do it on a territory-wide, basis. And we try to have such schools in 7 big districts across Hong Kong. For the traffic arrangement, I think there are about 2 28-seater coaches, school buses, that take the children to the school. And some other students can go to the school themselves because they are people with mild intellectual disability, not serious disability. And I can provide you with supplementary information too. How come that if there are 7 districts across Hong Kong, so why would this district have students from Cheung Kwan O? But this school actually covers Kowloon and Cheung Kwan O. That's a big district. Some schools do have students with mild intellectual disability and medium grade disability. Well, in Cheung O, there's another school that caters to the mildly disabled. Next one, Charles Mock. Last one is Leung Kwok Hong. I do support the 2 locations and the building of the 3 schools. Let me declare my interest, even though there's no monetary interest involved. But the Fortress Hill is the school. The Methodist school is the one that I went to. Now it may be a grade 1 building, and so I know the teachers there and also teachers from Hua Yan, and they are asking me for help to begin the reprovisioning. So now you're going to get funding from the Finance Committee. Of course, I support the reprovisioning of the school. And my 2 questions are, Kenneth Chan actually mentioned it about the transportation needed. I've been to the area. There's a turnaround spot for coaches. I'm just worried if there is to be a big bus making a turn there at the end of the road, or if a driver make a sharp turn up the road, then would it, for example, during the time when primary school kids are going to school, would danger be posed? And also the location of the 2 schools, I think that they're quite close to each other. Would it be quite substantive because there's not enough space between them? Undersecretary, the 2 schools, in terms of the size, The total area is about 4,200 square meters, quite small. So the schools are quite small in terms of their area. In terms of their facilities, we will provide with the facilities seen at standard school. As for transportation, we are concerned about the busy traffic there. Therefore, quite a large area in the school site will be used as a traffic area where cars can make turns there and be parked there. So this would remove the need for cars to unload passengers in the Ka-lok Road. We tried renting 2 large buses one day to have a trial use of the site, and the result of the trial showed that the result is quite favorable, near the Ka-lok Road. But have you consulted the 2 schools? Yes, we spent a lot of time discussing the school design with the 2 schools involved. They are totally aware of the future design and the locations and what facilities there will be. But they may have to share some facilities. Well, it's just a traffic area that they need to share, the area for cars to drive in and out of. Last one, Leung Kwok Hong. Chairman, of course, I will support building new schools for Hong Kong. I always said has invested too little in education. And the secretary has done so much, and yet there's not asked the government for more money. Of course, I do support giving money to the schools. But my question is, a few days ago, I met the principal of Fukien School. And I asked, that was a Ka-lok Yu. He asked me whether I could recognize him. He was Ka-lok Yu, and he said he was really looking forward to improvements to his school. That was a long time ago. In 2012, I went to the school during my electioneering activities, and and it was said that the school would be reprovisioned at the right time. But now, of course, it's good that you provide funding for the reprovisioning of the school. So is it that Ka-lok Yu is considered a school of secondary importance? So is it that the school is like the son of a concubine? Ka-lok Yu is not the son of the wife. Is that right? All right. I'll try to answer. All right. As you are so intelligent, you can try to answer. For Ka-lok Yu, as Mr. Leung has pointed out, in 2014, there were vacant premises in ward chair, and 2 floors were allocated to Ka-lok Yu, and so some improvement has been made. For that school, in fact, you really can't we really can't have additional space, because you said that the school would be reprovisioned, and yes, he did say that you gave the school 2 stories in another school, but then the principal said that he felt sorry for the students because only little improvement had been made. All right, do members agree that these items can go to PWSC? All right, no objection. Next item, issues related to cross-boundary students and establishing schools in Shenzhen for children born in Hong Kong, paper 92506.
And to answer members' questions, we have Mr. Kevin Young and his colleagues. All right, members who wish to ask questions, please raise their hands. Mr. Young, please. The zero delivery quota policy was implemented in 2013, and so the overall number of students, including cross-boundary students, will rise and peak in the 2015-16 and 2018-2019 school year for K1 and Primary 1 levels, respectively. In fact, we have revised the POA arrangements. We've compiled a list of schools for reference by the parents, and we have also borrowed school places from neighboring school nets. We are also expanding the capacity of existing schools. We are also building additional classrooms through extension projects. And for schools implementing small class teaching, we provide them with additional learning support grant when they are temporarily allocated more students per P1 class, up to a total of 30 students per class. And then for the Lo Wu Lok Ma Chau Spur Line boundary crossing point, local school buses are allowed to gain access to these BCPs, and also there are special quotas for cross-boundary school coaches for carriage of CBS through Lok Ma Chau, Man Kam To, Shuttlecock, and Shenzhen Bay Port BCPs. And we want to encourage more Hong Kong children currently residing in Shenzhen to pursue primary schooling in schools or classes operating under the scheme of classes for Hong Kong students. At present, there are 9 min-ban schools in Shenzhen participating in the scheme, and 2 more min-ban schools will be joining in 2015-16 school year. Concerning the proposal to establish publicly funded primary schools in Shenzhen for children born in Hong Kong, there are many problems. There are regulatory, operational, and financial complications, and also the surge in demand for primary school places is transient. 3 members have raised their hands: Tam Yu Chong, Ma Fong Kwok, Deputy Chairman, who else? Helena Wong, Yip Kwok Him, and Kenneth Chan. Mr. Tam Yu Chong, 3 minutes. Yes, no problem, Chairman. Concerning establishing publicly funded primary schools in Shenzhen for children born in Hong Kong, the administration doesn't want to pursue this idea. I can understand the reason. The student population may change, and also it takes time to establish these publicly funded schools in Shenzhen. Now, I understand that classes operating under the scheme of classes for Hong Kong students are very popular. So can we buy places in these schools or classes for Hong Kong children currently residing in Shenzhen, so that some of them will not have to come to Hong Kong for their schooling? Are there technical problems in doing this? And then second, because the policy has changed to 1 trip per week, and as a result, some parents may have difficulties bringing their children to school in Hong Kong, and of course it's safest if the parents can bring their children to school in Hong Kong, but in future the policy will be 1 trip per week. Yes, Chairman, I think the parents can apply for other types of endorsements or visas in the mainland in order to bring their children to school in Hong Kong. And if the parents need supporting documents for their applications, the schools in Hong Kong will try to assist. And then the idea of a board place program, we've considered this idea. We've talked to parents with children studying in kindergartens in Shenzhen, and the parents say that in fact they want their children to receive education in a Hong Kong environment. So whether a subsidy is provided to them is not the main issue. I still have a bit of time left, Chairman. There are now 9 Minban schools in Shenzhen participating in a scheme of classes for Hong Kong students, and 2 more will be joining in the coming year. You know, when students, then these students study in Hong Kong, it's free of charge. But then for these Minban schools, the school fees are rather high. Mr. Ma Fengguo. Chairman, in fact, I started following up on the issue 5 years ago as a local NPC delegate. But then at that time, the administration didn't really adopt a very serious attitude. And I don't think the administration has been viewing this issue very seriously. And that's why we now have problems associated with cross-boundary children coming to school in Hong Kong. You know, these children, they are born... in fact, they are Hong Kong children. They're very small, and they have to cross the boundary every day to go to school and to return home. So this is really highly unsatisfactory. The Undersecretary said that providing a subsidy would not help. I disagree. In fact, studying in the Minban classes in Shenzhen is rather expensive, and studying in Hong Kong is free of charge. And I do understand that parents want their children to receive education in Hong Kong, because for the Minban schools in Shenzhen, not all the teachers are well qualified. 5 years ago, we asked the administration to experiment with the proposal to establish publicly funded primary schools in Shenzhen, but the government was unwilling to do the experiment. And then what if in future many people do not like the political atmosphere in Hong Kong, and they want to live in Shenzhen, and you have to cater for the educational needs of their children. Now, I think you have to be proactive in finding solutions to the problem. You can't just passively wait for the peak period to pass. I think you should proactively take action, for example, to make sure that teachers teaching Hong Kong children in Shenzhen possess necessary qualifications. In fact, there are school-sponsoring bodies in Hong Kong which are interested in providing classes in Shenzhen, but then they want to know whether the government is willing to provide subvention. It's not my turn now. I agree with Mr. Ma Fengguo, if the government had acted proactively, then the situation would have been different. From the 2015 school year onwards, we are going to enter the period of peak demand, and this situation will be seen from K1 to P1. But then, of course, we understand that at the moment, kindergarten education is still not compulsory. So some may say that it's not the government's responsibility. But then I think about 2 years later, we'll be able to conclude whether we have been able to cope or not. After all, it's a matter of quantity. I want to raise a few points here. We have to try to cope in terms of quantity, and we also have to pay attention to other aspects. First, whether the children can get boundary clearance surface speedily and safely, and also the operation of cross-boundary school coaches. That's the first point. And then second, when cross-boundary students attend classes in Hong Kong, what support services do we need to provide to them? Some of these students come from very well-off families. Some come from grassroots families, and because of time constraint, they do have there will be some limitations concerning the education they receive in Hong Kong. And so concerning school coaches and also education for these cross-boundary students, do you think we are really addressing the special needs of different types of cross-boundary students? Undersecretary. Now, for cross-boundary students, they have to travel a long distance to and from school, and so they do share certain characteristics. And so in terms of teaching and learning, some special arrangements have to be made for cross-boundary students. For example, for certain activities and learning activities, they are arranged, they are provided on Saturdays instead of after school, so that they can also take part in those activities.
One Pig Wan. In the appendix, I can see the annex. I can see the situation in the secondary schools. In North District, Yunnan, Tuen Mun, they are districts with the largest number of cross-boundary students. There are quite a number of them in primary and school and kindergartens. Well, there are not as many students in secondary schools. But a few years from now, when the kids get older, there'll be more going to secondary school. So in the North District, Tuen Mun, are we prepared to accept these students when they reach secondary level? Undersecretary? Secondary places should be enough to accommodate these cross-boundary students. In those 3 districts, can they accept them? I think secondary students have a much higher turnover rate. Some may move to other districts. So we can't really look at the picture just based on the figures here. But on the whole, we think that there should be enough places. At the district level, the difference shouldn't be big. But I can't say for sure that each year from now on, the secondary places will fully accommodate the need, because ultimately people will come and go. But on the whole, we have enough secondary places, even within the new territories. So I'd like to ask you as well, have you done any survey on students in kindergartens, asking their parents what they plan? Are they planning to remain, in local schools when they get older, when the kids get older? Our understanding is that through our contacts, those who are in local kindergartens now, most of them would plan to attend local primary and secondary school. As for at which stage they would move to Hong Kong, it's difficult for us to get an answer from them. And even if they give you an answer now, that may not be totally reliable because there could be a lot of changes. But if they are children of just one parent, of a parent who is a Hong Kong person, and so the whole family may move to Hong Kong. But if the children are born to non-Hong Kong people, then there's no way the children can the child concerned apply for the parents to come to Hong Kong? Will they have to wait for 7 years or more? Well, Chairman, I can't really answer you on the immigration matter. Okay, next one is Ip Kok Him. On the decision by the Education Bureau, I find it very, very regretful. 5 years ago, we had mentioned this issue. Are you having this policy that's based on students or based on Education Bureau? You have to consider students when they're in kindergarten all the way up to secondary school, how they spend each day. Have you thought about how they spend the time now? Now, you say that the situation, the handling capacities, are actually coping, and that the demand is expected to stabilize. But I think I know you don't need people to worry about the the handling capacities. Many sponsoring bodies actually are concerned, but you have to think about the impact on the children who are commuting across the border every day. Look at the number of people who come to Hong Kong to work from Shenzhen. Sponsoring bodies, have never, considered whether they can continue with this. I don't know what the Education Bureau is thinking. The students are permanent residents. We have to understand that. They have the right, and they do hope to receive Hong Kong education. They want to learn about local curriculum. Why can't you give them the choice? Why can't you give them the chance? I think it's best for you to not to do anything at all. I think we need to look at the right of these children. Don't just look at the issue, from just implementing administrative policies. You have to look at, again, primary and then secondary places in the years to come, whether in the North District or not or elsewhere. You have to consider the long-term demand for these places. I don't know whether your decision now is the ultimate decision, or will there be changes? Undersecretary, what stage are you at now? Chairman, for setting up schools in Shenzhen, the purpose is to is that decision is made, as a solution to the presence of cross-boundary students, because some years down the road, the number of cross-boundary students will be reduced in number. So when we build schools in Shenzhen, whether that can be a school in the long run, Shenzhen for a long time, we do have doubt. Kenneth Chen, let's look at the annex in the paper. You can see that if you look at the number of cross-boundary students across the districts, in the North District, the number of these students actually exceeds 10,000. Tuen Mun areas which are near the border, they also face a lot of pressure from these cross-boundary students. Even though the Undersecretary said that we've reached the peak, after the zero delivery quota policy was introduced. But still, I think in the coming 8 to 10 years, I believe the Education Bureau need to shoulder a bigger responsibility and take the initiative to see, what issues or what needs do schools with the cross-boundary students have and how we can help them. It's not just about, resources and manpower alone. There may be adjustment issue, and cultural issues, and the physical demands on the children who are crossing the border every day, health implications, and so forth. So I think we do need to do a more in-depth analysis and information collection on those issues. I hope that the Bureau can continue to provide more information, systematic information, and gather the views from schools, listen to parents and students. These are all Hong Kong people. Even though there are schools in China for them, many of them may still choose to come to Hong Kong. So the cross-boundary, schooling is a big challenge. I met a mother in Sham Shui Po once, and the mother chose to really move to Hong Kong to live in a subdivided flat here, so that her kid would not need to cross the border every day. So I hope that the Bureau can collect more information to help us know more about the issue and see, what the challenges that these schools are facing. Some schools provide nannies, to look after the kids on the school bus under the one trip, one per week visa. Would it be possible that some nannies would not be able to come to Hong Kong to look after the kids? So would there be any implication on the safety of kids? Have you looked into that, for the Secretary? Chairman, for local school buses, there shouldn't be any problem because, the local coaches, buses, and the border area are run by Hong Kong people. But I think there may be still solutions to other operators. But I can find out more about this. As for challenges to learning in schools here, but Chairman, all along we have liaised with relevant schools and see what help they need, and we'll try to extend the help to them, whatever help they need. Michael Tian, Chairman, 2 years ago I wrote to the National People's Congress asking for the building of schools in Shenzhen to help children of Hong Kong people study there and receive Hong Kong education. And the Education Ministry replied that they would discuss the possibility with the Bureau and report back to the central government, and they would recommend that the Hong Kong Education Bureau and the Education Department in Guangdong to lay down the principles for setting a school in Guangdong. So the central government is very positive about building a school. But now the Bureau today said that, because of zero delivery quota and other reasons, it says that it's not feasible to have that kind of school. But I am thinking that more and more Hong Kong people now are living in Shenzhen, and their children do need schooling. There's news that the Shenzhen authorities estimated that by 2018 there could be 50,000 children of Hong Kong people in Shenzhen. So my question is simple. In 2014-15, we've got 25,000 cross-boundary students. How many of them are actually children of Hong Kong parents, not children of non-Hong Kong people? I don't think you have the data. Do you have it? Under Secretary, we didn't ask whether the parents are Hong Kong people or not. Okay, you don't have the data. But so we are all guessing here. You should try to find out among the cross-boundary students how many of them are children of Hong Kong people based in Shenzhen, and then find out from these parents if there is a publicly run school in Shenzhen. Would they choose to stay in Shenzhen instead of facing the difficulty of crossing the border every day? I think you must do that, get that information. Otherwise, we won't be convinced. The biggest problem I see now is that more and more people are moving to Shenzhen to live. If you don't resolve the need for education for the children, then you will be miss the bigger picture. And also the chief executive said in public that he wants Hong Kong people to develop their careers in the mainland. And many overseas people coming to Hong Kong, before they come, they will consider the education available here. When we want to encourage people to work in the mainland, they will also ask, these people will also ask, first of all, whether there are educational opportunities up on the mainland. So your policy now runs contrary to what the CE has said. Under Secretary, I think, as I explained earlier, we can't be sure. We know about the decline in the number of children born under the zero delivery quota. So our policy is we try to help enhance the quality of teaching in schools in Shenzhen, and so they have a choice. No, you haven't really answered my question. Your policy runs contrary to the statement made by the chief executive. Why is that? So, Under Secretary, please discuss it with the CE. Well, Chairman, I think we need to provide some choices for Hong Kong people working in Shenzhen. I think that the classes in Shenzhen are a solution. We have to keep enhancing the quality of teaching and learning there so that it will be on the par or so that it will be the teaching methods, the content will be similar to the level in Hong Kong.
Under Secretary, I think you should ask them, ask the parents how many of the children are crossing the boundary every day because there aren't enough classes available in Shenzhen? Or is it that in fact the parents want the children to receive education in Hong Kong, and that's why the children are crossing the boundary every day? Right, we still last item on the agenda. I've written a letter to the education panel proposing that the panel should conduct an overseas duty visit to Germany and Switzerland to study vocational education there. In fact, I have written a letter to panel members. Members, do you have any views or comments?
咁如果冇咩意見嘅話咧，黃碧
No, Ms. Helena Wong. Deputy Chairman, I support the idea. But I hope that you can give members more information about what we want to study, and also we want to know the timing, because other panels may also be planning overseas study visits. So please give us more information to enable us to make our decisions. In fact, it will be sometime in September. But of course, members' comments are welcome. Mr. Kenneth Chen, yes, but then schools in Europe are still having their summer holidays in September, so you have to make sure that the schools will be able to receive us. So we have to see whether they have already started their school year. Thank you. All right. Point taken. Yes, we want to visit the schools where during the school year, not during the summer vacation. Ms. Helena Wong, apart from the September slot, will there be other suitable slots? Because we're going to have the district council election in November, the 22nd of November. Or can we go in early December after the DC election? Will they be having their Christmas holidays? Well, of course, we have to consider other factors, including whether the council is in session, because we do not want our normal meetings to be disrupted. All right, so let's ask the Secretariat to do some research and planning, and then the Secretariat will report the details to members. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.